Last-minute shakeup at 5:30 a.m., laundry situation not good. And when your focus is on helping your clients, it's easy to forget about yourself. But NASM knows trainers.
Morning, Ryan. Is okay with
And staying in front of the day isn't always
Hey,
as simple
Ryan.
as 1,
What's
2,
up?
3. So when the unexpected has you pressing pause,
What's the latest on creatine?
I'm going to get back to you on that.
let NASM1 help you press play. Visit NASM.org to sign up for a membership today.
Hey everyone, welcome to Strong Mind, Strong Body. I'm your host, Angie Miller, and today it's you and me. We are talking about an emotional tsunami. So, what is that, you say? Well, that is how do you and I, your clients, your loved ones, and everyone around you survive life's storms? So, life's biggest transitions, things like divorce, breakups, job loss, moving, or the death of a loved one. They can shake us to our core, but they also offer this unique opportunity for growth and resilience. So, in this episode today, it's you and me, and I want to break down 5 of what I would consider life's toughest challenges. And I just want to give you some practical strategies to help you not just survive, but to thrive emotionally through each of these changes. I know that these are pivotal, powerful moments, and it's really important during times of change to protect your mental health so that you can emerge stronger and a better version of yourself. At the end of the day, maybe you are not going through divorce. Maybe you're not going through a breakup. Maybe you haven't lost anyone. I don't know what your situation is, but I guarantee you know someone around you who has or who will, or at some point you will. Because all of us throughout our lives experience some form of loss and grief, whether it's job loss or whatever that might be. So by the end of the show, I hope to help you understand the emotional impact of major life transitions, what makes them so challenging, and what you and other people can expect to experience. And then so that ideally you'll have some coping and some healing strategies to help you and those around you, including your clients, navigate change. Because when your clients are affected by life transitions, whatever they are, they're going to show up differently. They're going to experience life differently. It's going to be harder to get out of bed in the morning and to be motivated to do the things they normally do. So keep in mind that life transitions trigger significant stress response to the body and to the mind. And we know that anytime we're in a chronic stress situation, that it leads to things or can lead to things like heart disease, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, depression. Prolonged stress over the course of time that is chronic can cause damage to our body and our mind for until we find ways to cope and until we find ways to manage these significant life changes. So that's my goal for you today, is to figure out ways that I can help you deal with these life changes. So the first one that I want to talk about is divorce. So I just decided I would go in, go big, or go home, right? Let's talk about the biggie. Let's talk about divorce. I've had a few friends just in the past year going through the divorce process. And I can tell you from a person who sits as a therapist, but also as a friend, it looks and it feels different for every single person going through it. The emotional impact of divorce often looks like this. Divorce brings feelings of failure, feelings of rejection, feelings of a loss of identity. And the emotional toll is often compounded by what was once this central relationship in a person's life. So it's not just that feeling, especially in divorce, the number one thing that you often hear people say is that they feel like they have failed, right? They did this big thing, they took it on, they took vows for life, and then it feels like they failed. And again, our identity is often tied up in our relationship status and how we connect with that partner. So when that goes, it feels like a big part of our lives and our identity goes with it. So, some of the coping strategies I think for divorce is first and foremost, it requires a really, really powerful support system. You have to have a strong network of family and friends or a therapist that can provide emotional support. And this is a tough one during divorce because often clients and friends report to me that people take sides, right? Like maybe as a couple, you're connected to other couples, and then this divorce happens and everyone feels like they have to take a side. So like maybe he takes the spouse, your spouse's side and she takes your side or vice versa. And that can be really challenging because it can feel like your core group is no longer your core group because people feel like they have to take a side in the situation. So that often means then they have to build a whole nother support network. But the one thing that I always find to be true with clients and with friends is that even when you're looking at it and you think, gosh, I've lost my main network, right? I've lost my partner for life. I've lost my, this spouse. My family is no longer the same. Now my friends have chosen to take sides. Who are my anchors, right? Like I'm climbing this rock wall and somebody keeps removing an anchor and I don't have anything to hold on to anymore. But the one thing that I'm always seeing over and over again that I can assure you is that people will show up for you. And often it's the people you least expect or suspect. So oftentimes it's people in the perimeter, people that maybe you weren't connected to before, but they hear that you're going through a divorce and they've been through a divorce. So they have that compassion and that empathy that they can give to you. And it's not necessarily the people that you were initially connected to and that you felt were your support network. Just invite and open yourself up to the idea that support will come. It will come to you. You often have to seek it, but it often may not come from the people that you expect it from. But it's out there. It's out there. People will resonate with your story once you share your story and you're willing to get vulnerable. But another coping strategy when you're going through such a dark, difficult time is just being able to prioritize yourself, being able to really focus on, I hesitate to use the word self care, but just focus on self acceptance, self compassion, self love. What are things that you can do to nurture you? So it could be exercise, meditation, journaling, or just finding new hobbies. I hosted a retreat for women recently, and we were up in the Blue Ridge Mountains, and 3 out of the 5 had been through a major divorce over the past couple of years, and that experience proved to be one of the most healing experiences for them, and they talked about how being able to share their story and being able to open up to women who they didn't previously know, because you and I both know one thing to be true. A lot of times it's easier to tell a perfect stranger something very intimate and personal than it is someone you know well. So they found a lot of healing in going to that retreat and sharing their story with other women that they were connected to and sharing space with, but that they didn't have a long history with. So maybe it's finding a retreat, finding a therapist, and again, just being willing to be vulnerable and share your story because people are out there and they will offer you support. But another thing that is really important when it comes to coping with divorce is just being able to accept that we have to redefine our personal identity. So it's about finding who you are outside of the marriage. It's like stripping away all of the identities. Like, who are you or who were you before you became a mom or a dad? Who were you became before you became a spouse? Who were you before you became all the identifiers, the friend, and all the people, all the ways that you show up for other people? Who are you at your core? What matters the most to you? How do you most, stay true to you and what you love to do? And so a lot of times it's reconnecting with old passions, exploring new interests, and just rediscovering your own independent identity outside of that relationship. I find that people who go through a divorce, when you look at them a year after the divorce, it's almost like you don't even recognize that person. They have really explored and gotten clear on who they are and what matters to them. They've really learned what it feels like to go to lunch by themselves or go to a movie by themselves or take a walk by themselves and just really dig deep into, hey, I no longer have to focus on this relationship and how to make this other person happy. Now, guess what? The only person I have to make happy is me. And that can be a very, very profound way to grow and change. So, another way is just when you're thinking about a divorce, it's just reframing the narrative. Instead of seeing the end of the marriage as the end of memories and years together, which it is, it's also about reframing as an opportunity, again, for personal growth. It's a chance to kind of start fresh and create a life that aligns with your values and your goals. And remembering, who was I before I got married 5 years ago, a year ago, 30 years ago? Who was I and what brought me joy? And how do I reconnect with that person and then explore an even bigger version of me now that I've had this experience of being a married person? But I also think it's important to consider counseling or support groups, right? So I want to go into now talking about a breakup, but know that when I talk about a breakup, I'm also going to be talking about divorce because I have something that I want you to really consider doing after a breakup or a divorce. So I'm going to kind of lump them together, but let's still kind of give a breakup its own time and space, if you will. So breakups, all of us, whether we've been married or not, I bet you every one of us listening right now has been through a breakup with a partner, right? And you know that when you break up, it leads to all this grief and self doubt and these feelings of loneliness. There can be a deep sense of loss, not just of the relationship, but of your future plans and all these shared experiences. And it's that same way with divorce. It's not just a loss of the relationship, it's a loss of this is what I thought we were going to be doing at this stage of our lives, or these are the experiences that I thought we were going to have together. And now this person is going to have these experiences with someone else. And so there is a big emotional impact, and we have to allow ourselves the time and the space to grieve that. And so, right now, that's my first strategy and my first suggestion to all of us out there. When you're going through a divorce or breakup, I think the first thing that you have to do is allow yourself to grieve. Grieve the loss. Allow yourself to sit with that grief, however long that it takes you. Time and space to mourn. If we rush into distractions or new relationships, we miss out on the opportunity to find ourselves. I feel like I've seen this a lot with clients and with friends. I had a friend tell me recently, she's a year and a half post divorce. And I asked her how she was doing. And she said, I'm doing better now that I've slowed down. And she said, I was running, Angie. I was trying to make plans every weekend. I always felt like I had to be doing something. Like that became my new identifier. Do I have enough friends? Do I have enough things to do? And she said, now, about a year and a half later, I realized I need to slow down. I need to get clear with me. I need to get comfortable with me. And we talked about how her goal is to take a trip all by herself and just to explore her on a vacation instead of again trying to please her former husband on trips. And what do you want to do? Well, I don't know. What do you want to do? The only person you have to ask is you. So we talked about what that looks like, just to sit tight for a minute and sit into that grief instead of trying to escape the grief. I think another key component of coping with breakups and divorce is in the process of grieving. We know it's dark and it's ugly and it's tears and it's just, oh, it's all the things, right? So the temptation is to kind of numb. Numbing could be running full on, like my friend did, which is, going everywhere all the time, never wanting to be home alone. That's kind of a form of numbing, not wanting to get clear with yourself, not wanting to be alone in your own thoughts. But there's also those other numbing behaviors like overeating, undereating, alcohol, or any type of addictive substance. There's also isolation, which is the opposite of just constantly being out there. So I think in order to avoid the numbing behaviors, we do need that strong support system. Otherwise, it is more tempting to close up shop, if you will, and to get, too deep inside of there and not be able to cope with the darkness. And then we try these numbing behaviors. So I think a really powerful coping strategy with divorce and with breakups is, again, get really, really comfortable with that whole self reflection and self discovery process. Be curious like a kid, right? Who am I outside of being that partner, that mom, that dad, that friend, that daughter, or that son? Those are part of how I identify, but ideally, I'm a full human, and those are just extensions of who I am at my core. So, who are you at your core? Who were you before you were all those things to all those people? I would love for you to sit tight with that, even if you're not going through a breakup, even if you're not going through a divorce. So, again, I'm Angie Miller. This is Strong Mind, Strong Body. And I am talking about an emotional tsunami, how to deal with five of life's biggest transitional phases. So, another thing that when you're going through this divorce or this breakup is just to really get very practiced on being self compassionate and self accepting. Be kind to yourself. Remember that breakups, as much as they feel like failures, and divorces, as much as they feel like failures, they don't define your worth. They might be the end of one thing, but they're the beginning of another thing. They're the beginning of another chapter. And maybe even if it was the other person who wanted out and was not shy about telling you all of your faults, maybe we just remember that that's one person's lens. There are how many people on the planet? So contextually, that's one opinion. So learn from what's worth learning from. Maybe your partner at the end said some things to you and you think, there was an element of truth to that. It hurt like heck, but there was an element of truth to it. It doesn't make you a bad person. It doesn't define you, but it could be something about you that is worth working on and growing from. So I say, take what you need, let the rest go. And last but not least, just give yourself grace and remember that healing takes time. No one gets to define how long it's going to take you to heal, right? Or what that healing process is going to look like. So you have to do you. And again, reflect on what you learned and avoid all that self criticism. So, one of the ways that I think, though, that we can grow from these breakups is just to immerse ourselves in different ways of exploring ourselves so that we see ourselves through other people and other experiences. So, whether that means you take dance classes, or whether it means you take up boxing, or you take up improv, or you take up storytelling, or piano, or golf, it's a way of seeing yourself through other people's lens and exploring yourself through activities so that you can deep dive and learn a little bit more about who you are. So, one thing to keep in mind before I kind of close this is that breakups can activate the same brain regions as physical pain. It can feel like you're in physical pain, right? Like your heart is literally breaking. You can feel weak and tired and without any energy. So, know that if that goes on for too long, it's time to seek help, but it is normal if there is a normal, right? So, one other thing, breakups, whether they're initiated by you or someone else, I think it's worth covering something here. I want to spotlight this because I'm going to be honest, in my personal and professional experience, people assume that if you initiate a divorce or a breakup and you were the one who wanted out, you'll probably be free from the pain or the guilt or the self doubt. But I beg to differ on this one. In my experience, I think that's an unfair assumption, and it doesn't consider how difficult change can be. So, whether we initiate the breakup or the divorce or not, change is change, and the body and the mind have to adjust. Change requires adaptation and it takes time. The reality is that even if we know deep in our heart that in the long run, it's best for us to get out of this relationship, we are probably still going to experience the same emotions, such as grief, self doubt, possible remorse, and even shame. So holding somebody to different standards because they wanted out of the relationship, I think can be, kind of harsh, because I think two things can be true at the same time. You can want out and know that it's best, but you can still feel angst and self-doubt. And oftentimes what I find is that the person who wants out is struggling not just with the grief, they're struggling with guilt because they were the ones who wanted out of the relationship. So I would urge you to view other people's breakups and your own with compassion, right? And especially with other people, view it with the compassion that you would want from others. Whether they initiated it or not, they are entitled to feel all the feels. They will go through that process of grief and loneliness and all the ways that they struggle with change. Okay. So it's not pretty either way, but it doesn't mean that it's the wrong thing. And it doesn't mean that it won't change your life in powerful, positive ways. It doesn't mean that it won't make you stronger and allow you to get more in touch with who you are, what you're capable of, and make you more determined to live your best life moving forward. So that's breakups and divorce. The other big life transition that I want to talk about today is job loss. Because I find that, during the pandemic and now, there's so much change in our world, and there's a lot of movement with jobs, and there's a lot of job loss. Sometimes it's our decision, sometimes it's someone else's decision, as in the company's decision. But there's still going to be an emotional impact. Job loss especially brings about these feelings of like inadequacy and uncertainty. And of course, there's the financial stress of job loss, right? There's also the loss of a daily routine, right? A loss of purpose and a loss of structure. And we know that when we lose purpose, we lose the reason that we get out of bed in the morning. So many times we highly identify not just with who we are, but what we do. So our jobs are a big identifier for us. So when we feel like we've lost that purpose or that identity, it can really exacerbate anxiety, depression, not to mention the loss of identity and attack on the ego. The thing is that I've quit jobs, left jobs, and grieved jobs. A friend of mine and I were talking the other day, and we were out to dinner, and her job, she was working at a job that she was being paid through a grant, and they lost the grant. And she said, Angie, I don't understand. It's been like 6 months. I have another job, and I still cry over my other job. And I said, hey, you know what? As far as I'm concerned, you can cry as long as you need to. Two things can be true. You can be sad that you lost this other job because it was such a huge part of who you were and how you identified. And you can be grateful that you have a new job. And for her, I pointed out that her old job really spoke to her purpose. It really gave her a reason to get out of bed in the morning. It totally spoke to her purpose and what she loved the most, which was helping other people. Her new job brings in income, gives her insurance, but what it doesn't provide her is a lot of purpose. It's more of a task job. So we talked about the difference of having jobs that truly align with our purpose and having jobs that are more task jobs that kind of pay the bills. We go through the motions, but they don't really speak to us in our heart. So I think that whether you leave a job or a job leaves you, so to speak, there is a lot of grief that goes along with that. We've moved a lot of times, and I've had to let a lot of jobs go. And there are jobs that I still grieve. I grieve my job at the university. I grieve teaching college students. That was one of my favorite things that I ever did. But when we left Illinois, I left that job. So I think that when you're coping with job loss, it's really important to have daily structure. Without the routine of a job, it's important to establish this daily schedule, right? Kind of the night before when you go to bed, kind of lay out a few goals that you've got for the next day, whether it's job hunting or learning a new skill, or I'm going to go to the gym at 9 a.m., whatever that looks like. And when it comes to goals and, us kind of think about it, our days are so structured when we have jobs, right? We know what we're doing pretty much every minute of the day, at least 8 hours of the day. And then when we don't have a job, we're like, oh, wow, that's a big hunk of time. What do I do with it? How do I structure it so that I feel like I have purpose? So I think it's important to focus on these small, achievable goals. Break this overwhelming task of finding a job into smaller steps. Like this week, I'm going to update my resume. Next week, I'm going to start reaching out to contacts. Next week, I'm going to start applying for positions. And then in the midst of all that, focus on ways that you can grow personally and professionally. And a perspective shift for job loss is that when you lose a job, whether it's choice or not, it's a great time to reassess your career path and passions. Sometimes losing a job, no matter how much joy it brought you, opens doors to opportunities you might not have ever considered, leading to more fulfilling work in the long run. When I left the university position, I was in just a lot of grief. And yet, what it really inspired me to do is to do more of the work that I do as a therapist. It inspired me to do more of that. It inspired me to do more speaking and educating because at my core, that's what I love to do. So just like a breakup and a divorce, again, you can leave the job, but you can still grieve the job. So whether it's your choice or not, expect that you're still going to go through that identity crisis, and it's going to look and feel different than someone else's. All right. So again, I'm Angie Miller. This is Strong Mind, Strong Body. We're talking about emotional tsunamis. So I want to move into moving. I need a whole episode for this one because I got to tell you all. I grew up in Iowa. I lived in Germany for a minute when I was a kid. I lived in Switzerland when I was in college. But other than that, I lived in the same house my whole life, all 18 years. My mom's house that I grew up in is the house that I grew up in. So even though I was in Germany for a little bit, it wasn't until I went to college that I went to Switzerland. I didn't grow up moving around. I was not a mobile person. I grew up in one home. Then I married my husband. Next thing you know, I got a job in Kansas City teaching school. That's what moved me there. Then after he and I got married, we moved to Des Moines, Iowa. We moved to Northwest Arkansas. We moved to Scottsdale, Arizona. Then we moved to the suburbs of Chicago. And then we moved to Charlotte. And you know what? I don't know how else to say it except that moving is brutal. Okay. It's beautiful, but it's brutal. There's a huge emotional impact to moving, especially to a new city or a new country. It can bring so much anxiety about the unknown. It can make you feel disconnected, homesick. You've lost your touch points. Again, you're climbing this rock wall, but somebody keeps removing anchors. You don't have your home, there's an anchor. You don't have your friends, there's an anchor. If you've moved, chances are to another state, you don't have your job, there's another anchor. So you're trying to climb without anything to hold on to. You don't have that familiar environment or familiar relationships. So here's the thing: feelings of isolation, a lack of belonging, that sense that you don't have anything to hold on to, all those things are true and, quote, normal when you move. But moves can also come with other changes, just like breakups and job loss. It's an emotional attack on everything that grounds you. So here's some coping that I think is really, really important. For me personally, the biggest thing that I do when I move is I go find a gym and I start teaching group fitness classes. That's always been the way that I cope. That's my first thing that I do because group fitness grounds me, brings me joy, connects me to a bunch of people, gives me a sense of purpose, allows me to educate and spread joy to other people. And then from there, I start doing the other work that I like to do. I start looking for a job as a therapist, or maybe it would be a job as working at a university. But I think you have to find that thing. So whether it's that you're going to go join a gym or you're going to take a dance class, right? When you move, or you're going to do something that kind of gets you immersed into the community. So I think that the biggest coping strategy is to embrace that it is a new beginning. Yes, you can grieve and you can accept that it's a new beginning. So, seeing it as kind of an adventure when you're ready, right? Allow yourself to grieve with compassion, unpack what was kind of, unpack what was, forcing you to jump in and accept or unpack what you're holding so that you don't force yourself to jump in and accept, hey, this is my new place. I just have to deal. I don't agree with that. I think you don't just have to deal. I think you can unpack what's in there, unpack the grief and the loss, and then you can start to get into your new environment. But I also think that those daily rituals matter too when you move, right? Establish things that bring you this sense of consistency and comfort in your new space. So whether you're setting up pictures from your old place or pictures of friends or pictures of family, or maybe your daily ritual is you're going to take a walk and you're going to explore your new neighborhood or your new area. So, something that gives you routine and a sense of purpose. And then I think seeking community support, right? Seeking out social opportunities. So, maybe you join local clubs or you get involved in community events. You just have to find some way of building this new support system when you're ready. And then, most importantly, it's that mental reset. Instead of staying stuck in what you left behind, being able to direct your energy and your excitement to what's new and what's ahead. But a lot of times that's just going to take a lot of journaling, a lot of support, maybe a lot of therapy, and maybe it just involves creating this vision board for what you want your new life to look like. All right. So far we've covered divorce, breakup, job loss, moves, which I feel like I could write a book about. And last but not least, I want to talk about death of a loved one. There's such a huge emotional impact to grieving the loss of someone we love. It's deep grief, it's disbelief. A lot of times it's loaded with anger and just profound sadness. It's really hard when you lose somebody. It's hard. When I lost my mom and it felt like the world was just still going on, and I'm like, wait, how come nobody's noticing? I just suffered a huge loss and the rest of the world is still moving along. And worse yet is that oftentimes people seem to have like a time limit on grief. So if you say, well, I lost my mom, and they're like, well, when did you lose her? And gosh forbid you say more than a week ago, because they kind of look at you like, well, you're not over it yet. But grief is a lifetime, right? When you lose your parents, you lose your partner, you lose a loved one, a sibling, big grief, right? It lasts a lifetime. You never stop grieving those you love. And I don't think there's a time limit on it. It can also challenge your belief system and your sense of security. At the end of the day, when people pass, for instance, our parents, they take with them a lifetime of untold stories, unanswered questions, pieces of history that we never thought to ask them about. They take their experiences, their wisdom, the intimate details of their lives, leave with them, often before we ever had the chance to truly explore the richness of their lives and their memories. So then, after they're gone, we're left with this realization that the opportunity to truly understand their past and our own connection to it is gone. So I say this because I would encourage you, if you still have your parents, ask those questions now. Ask your loved ones those questions now, because once people are gone, they do take that with them. So I think a big coping strategy for grief is just to give yourself permission to grieve fully and wholeheartedly as long as you need, with a whole heck of a lot of self-compassion. And understand that grief is not linear. It does not go in stages in a linear fashion. You might feel like you've covered this stage, you're no longer angry, and then guess what? Something happens, a trigger happens, and you're angry all over again. That's part of grief. But I think support networks are powerful and pivotal and really necessary at this time. And also honoring the memories of those you lose, creating rituals or kind of creating a space that honors the person that you have lost, right? So, or engaging in acts of kindness in their memory. So, my mom died of dementia. This weekend, I'm leading the warm up at the Alzheimer's Walk here in Charlotte. And I'm doing that because it's my way of saying, this is a cause that means a lot to me, and it's giving my pain purpose. So remember that there are societal expectations around grief. And I hope for your sake that you put those expectations aside and you say, you know what? I get to grieve at my own pace in my own way. So remember that change overall, life transitions are a catalyst for growth and resilience. When in doubt, maybe just reflect on some of the big life transitions you've already successfully navigated and the strengths that you've developed and how you've grown and why you're better for it in the end. So I hope that this episode leaves you with an ounce of compassion, an ounce of acceptance that life transitions, we all face them. They're difficult for everyone, and you're not alone. So, again, I'm Angie Miller. I will see you next week.